Gospel reading this morning comes from the book of John, chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected, "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me."
I recently read that there is a union rule among teenagers that they only have 3 responses for their parents. The first is, huh? The second is, I don't know. And the third is, oh yeah. Like, you know, did you take out the garbage? Huh? I mean, what were you thinking of? I don't know. Well, take it on out. Oh yeah. Well, of course, Judas is not a teenager, but we wonder what in the world was he thinking? What was Judas thinking? Now, Judas is kind of a cardboard character in the Gospels. He's always named, followed by a parenthetical statement that he's the one who betrays Jesus. And we wonder, what was Judas really like? There's been a lot of good stories about why Judas would have done that. My favorite is Jesus Christ Superstar. He's got part of it right. Jesus did say to that rich young ruler, he said, "Sell all you have and give it to the poor." But Judas doesn't understand what's going on with Mary. And I imagine Judas is probably the brightest of all the disciples. He's the smartest and he knows it. I like I said, the way Jesus Christ Superstar starts out. It's Judas's story. And he sings, "My mind is clearer now. At last, all too well, I can see where we all soon will be. If you strip away the myth from the man, you will see where we all soon will be. Jesus, you've started to believe these things they say of you. You've started to believe this talk of God is true. Now all that you've said and done will soon be swept away. You've become to matter more than the things you say." Judas follows Jesus to listen to Jesus. Judas likes Jesus because Jesus is saying things that really make sense. But it's all up here. Boris Pasternak wrote, "When things are laid out, ordered, factual, they are not big enough to embrace the whole world. Life always spills over the rim of every cup." Mary knew that cup, and she knew that life. But you remember the story when Martha's in cooking for all the guys, and Mary's sitting with the guys out there in the parlor and listening to Jesus. And she has to. Because in the words of Jesus, not just the words that she's thinking about, it is something about the love of God comes pouring upon her. She's immersed in those words like she's been dropped in a lake of love and surrounded and breathing it in and out. And she dies in the midst of those words, and she is born again. And then she's in the midst of all this, feeling this love in every fiber of her being. And here comes Martha. Jesus, tell that sister of mine to come in here and help with the meal. Boy, there's a bucket of cold water, isn't it? But then Jesus shows his love directly. He stands up, I think figuratively and physically. He turns to Martha and says, Mary is doing what she must do right now. Give her some slack. You see, she didn't fit in. She wasn't a good woman by all the rules, but Jesus loved her and stood for her because of her and because of his unconditional love. And then, sometime later, Lazarus got terribly sick. He was in terrible pain, and before Jesus could get there to heal him, Lazarus died. And Jesus didn't arrive then, so they had to bury him. And it was 4 days after he died that Jesus showed up. And they're saying, why couldn't you have been here? You could have healed him. But Jesus says, don't worry. And he calls out, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus comes out of the tomb. Jesus calls us all to arise, come out of the tomb, to accept this presence of God's love, to seek after it. And now I think Mary sensed that this source of love was going to be gone soon. And what she feared was this. While her brother had died and Jesus brought him back out of the tomb, if Jesus died, there'd be no Jesus to call Jesus out of the tomb. And she'd be so lost. So lost. So here is Judas on one side of the room talking about money. And here is Mary, who has received an extravagant gift. The presence of God's love in her whole life. She had to show her gratitude, her love, in as extravagant a way as she could. And so she went out and got this bottle of perfume. Expensive bottle of perfume. And she breaks it open and pours it out on Jesus' feet and wipes it with her hair. Extravagant. Extravagant giving. Extravagant response. This is what God promises. This is why we come to this place. To remember it, to think about it, and then to experience it and to know it. And then to share that extravagance with God and with Christ. Thanks be to God.